to Adventuring Academy Office Hours. I'm your humble Dungeon Master, Brennan Lee Mulligan. Thanks, gang, for tuning in and hanging out. This is our little show where we take some time to talk about the art of running a tabletop role-playing game. We have a bunch of great questions. In the chat, feel free to hit us up with some questions. So go right ahead. We got Kyle right off screen who's looking in the chat, getting your guys' questions, and we'll try to answer as many as we can. Also, make sure to check out dropout.tv where you can see episodes of Dimension 20. We have our live game, which will be airing tonight. It's our last episode before the holiday, which will be tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Pacific, which will, of course, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And then we'll have 2 weeks off, and we'll be back January 8th, I believe, will be when the live show starts up again in the new year. You can also find cool merch and stuff on the Dropout merch store. We got a bunch of cool Dimension 20 merch and stuff there. But without further ado, we'll jump right in.
Hey, Brennan, just address.
Yeah,
you got this like thing popping up.
Oh no, is there?
I see it. I'm trying to get rid of it.
Oh, cool. Okay.
The camera's doing something weird.
If you notice a weird floating plus sign in front of my face, that's good and normal. Learn to love the plus sign. It's supposed to be there. We'll start with this as a fun question. Any ideas for a compelling way to get the party to meet and then want to stay together? I feel like the idea of strength in numbers / you've all been hired / random tavern meeting has been overused. I think you're right. I think that getting the party together and cohesive and on the same page is one of the joys of any group of storytelling. That's literally like a big chunk of so many classic fairy tales and fantasy storytelling. The binding of the fellowship, the Council of Elrond, the Dorothy meeting the Scarecrow and the Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion and learning, wow, we each want a different thing from the Wizard of Oz. As in all of these things, really what you're talking about when you're talking about these issues is you're talking about motivation, right? In improv, in acting, in writing, in tabletop role-playing, nothing feels more uncomfortable and awkward and prone to bouts of cognitive dissonance than having your character do some stuff they wouldn't normally do because you're there playing a game of D&D, right? It really sucks when you're going on an adventure and you can't get into character because there's no reason for your character to be doing any of this stuff. You're like, well, we're here, my DM put a lot of work into this session, and now we're going. Now, I will say that good players do tend to be those who find ways to justify why their character's doing what they're doing, right? Nobody likes the player who is doing rude, antisocial stuff in character and going like, what? That's how my character would behave. So a little bit of softening the edges of your character to make them a little bit more agreeable and having the flow of the story move forward, that's okay. You can sand the edges off, but it gets to be problematic when the foundations of why these characters are going on an adventure in the first place is completely like opaque or unclear to the characters, right? So I think that there's a couple answers to this question. Number one, if you are worried about having characters with different motivations, if you're worried about having characters all across the map, you need to start putting a thumb on the scales during character creation with your PCs. This is sort of like my little soapbox that I get on. A DM's work doesn't start as play begins at the first session. It doesn't even start at session 0 before, well, you're like laying down groundwork for how the campaign's going to work. Your job comes in with assisting your players in making characters that will have fun in your campaign. No player that I've ever met has been ungrateful for information about what kind of campaign this is going to be. If you go to your players and you're like, this is going to be a mystery, your players are going to go, oh, thank God. Okay, cool. I'm going to be an inquisitive rogue or a diviner wizard. I'm going to like be the kind of character that would succeed in this type of storytelling. If you go to your characters and say, hey, this is real, knock down the door, looting for treasure, then your characters can all be those mercenary type characters, but there's all agreement about that, right? So I think overall what you want is this idea of like, I'm getting a note. I can't read it because your hand's in front of it.
So you want to take a 1 minute break to fix this?
We're going to take a 1 minute break to fix some technical issues. Hold on 1 second. Hell yeah, we're back. Hey, gang. Is it good? Was there a wacky plus sign in front of my face? I'm about to see it pop up on the screen in a second. Live! It's live! Very exciting.
I'll take the full blame on that one.
No, totally fine. Let's see, is it about to pop back up in a moment? I have it sort of on my screen right now. Well, to continue answering the question, because I'll jump back into it, what we want, oh, there I see my face finally. And there's no plus sign, we're all good. So to continue answering that question, it's, first of all, the easiest fix to this question of what do I do with player character motivation? How do I get them all on the same page? You can give a mission statement to the adventuring party during character creation, which the PCs will have a lot of fun with. I promise you that will work. But let's say that you want something more classic. Like, you don't want them all to be on the same page. You want Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan and Han Solo. You want a character that's a true believer and another character that's like, I'm skeptical of that. I'm just in it for the money. That can be really fun. What you want to do then is I would recommend in your earlier sessions doing what we tend to do in Dimension 20, which is giving characters their own intro. PCs are individuals, and while the party does have a shared story, each individual character has their own story, like threads in a tapestry that moves through that larger interwoven story. So start by addressing their wants and needs. If your PCs haven't necessarily written a want or desire or motivation for their character, dive into it with them and give them one in the game. Remember, there are certain motivations that are going to be palpable, right? Even if your characters don't necessarily feel heroic or whatever, if you have them witness some horrible crime that they have to avenge or something of theirs gets stolen, you will watch as real grounded emotional reactions begin in your players. And that can be enough to begin a train of reaction. What you're looking for at the end of the day is strong emotional reactions buried deep in the heart of the characters that spur them forward so that their desire to go on these adventures is not coming from some external force that is obliging them to do something, but from an interior want that they feel they have agency over and control of, right? I think that's really critical. We'll go ahead and find some more questions here. Here's a fun one from Slightly Irish. I hear you, Slightly Irish. How do I make a good NPC character in the party? So I assume you mean by making a good NPC character in the party, this is an NPC ally or helper that's going to be journeying with them. it is not your job to make an NPC ahead of time that's going to be traveling with the party. I guarantee you, first of all, not to be stereotypical, but if you make an NPC off the top of your head that you think will never be beloved by the party and is just kind of a throwaway one-off character, your PCs will so obsessively adore that character that they will bring that character on adventures with them forever. Even if that character has no abilities, they will do it. So your PCs will determine who goes with them and who doesn't. But if you are making characters mechanically that are helping the party, I think a good rule of thumb is there an ability that the characters don't have that they need for this type of adventure, right? Let's say your party is like a wizard, a rogue, and a paladin, and now you have a wilderness adventure. And you're like, oh, we don't have any wilderness characters. An NPC ranger that helps them with that leg of the journey can be really good and helpful. Same with like an NPC healer, right? I also think it's nice when NPCs tend to be support characters. No one wants to get kill stolen by an NPC. No one wants the big bad guy to be killed by an NPC helper. So it's nice sometimes if NPCs have abilities that grant advantage or heal characters or do other things that are supporting that kind of through line in the adventure, I think. Adeline Zyla, which that is a fantasy name. You're a D&D character. Adeline Zyla, how do you come up with stories on the fly? Like when a player does something completely unexpected, how do you make a response? You will psych yourself out too much if you put the pressure on yourself to think of it as think of a story on the fly. Your job, I kind of actually dislike the term storyteller for Dungeon Masters. I think it over mystifies what it is that Dungeon Masters do. Like, I've written stories before, you know, myself and Molly Ostertag made Strong Female Protagonist, which is a webcomic. That's writing a story where you're literally beating out, you know, beginning, middle, end. That's not what I do when I'm DMing. When I'm DMing, I'm improvising. I am listening to my players and responding to what they do. I think most DMs would be much better off forgetting storytelling and just thinking about listening. Just listen and see what your players are trying to do, and you will tell a story by just reacting to what they do, right? And you're reacting as someone in charge of your setting's NPCs, and also the environments, the monsters, the weather, all sort of stuff like that. So your job is just to react honestly, and a story will be created from those honest reactions. If you make a powerful villain who is trying to take over the world, you don't need to come up with a compelling story. The compelling story will come about when you pursue that villain's objectives. Your PCs discover and find out about it, and they begin to try to thwart each other. Your job is just to follow the truth and logic of that relationship. Now, story tropes can be good things to have in your back pocket. You can think about things like dramatic irony or timing, or like, ooh, what would be a really surprising twist? What would be a good cliffhanger for this session? But those don't need to be pre-planned. Those can be instincts that you follow in the moment. The best advice I can give for DMs that want their games to feel like good, compelling stories is think of all the stories that you've read and loved. Keep those like sort of blocks in a toy chest. And when you reach into the toy chest in response to something that happened in the moment, you'll grab a lovely trope. You'll grab something from stories that you adore and that means a lot to you. But you're not trying to pre-plan all of that. So just be truthful, be honest, play your NPCs to the best of your ability, and respond in the moment to what people are doing. Let's see here. Charles Lee Rossing. Thanks, Charles Lee Rossing. Do you have any advice for running a game where players come and go, like a sort of thieves guild with many players? You mentioned it before, but I'm curious as to the logistics of having characters. Thanks, Charles Lee Rossing. this is the best example of this, and you guys can watch. Matt Colville did a great video on these called West Marches style campaigns. So West Marches means that, players come and go. Because characters can come and go in a setting if they die, if horrible things happen. But you're talking about players coming and going, right? I played in a campaign called Storm City, which was like a fantasy noir, crime-oriented thing, where we never left this one city. It was a single city, and adventures happened. And we played it at my summer camp, the Wayfinder experience, and there were like 40 different players in the game because from week to week the staff would rotate, right? So Storm City was an example of this kind of campaign. It's really fun. What you have to think about it more is that it's not going to have a driving, it's like the opposite of something like Critical Role that has these incredible, epic, long, surging narratives where you're like family with these PCs at the end of it. And it's really a lot more like a soap opera. Characters rotate, some characters pick up a plot here and resolve it over here. So it's a lot more episodic. You're trying to resolve adventures more in the moment. And you're never going to rely on sort of that idea of main characters. It's more about a setting and an ambiance, and then different characters pick up the baton back and forth, right? So that can be really, really fun, though, and rewarding. Let's see here. Another question. Ella M. What do your DM notes look like before a session? This is my first time DMing, and I'm wondering what format you put them and how much info you usually put. Thank you. Ella, this is a great question. My notes vary tremendously dependent on what type of session I'm running. If I'm running the beginning of a campaign, I might not have any notes. I might have the setting details that I've sent to the players, like the world background, what the different characters they might know are. And then I might have a loose plot in my head, and we'll go from there, or maybe we will, I'll have some idea of a dungeon or a map or something like that. But honestly, with low-level play when you're starting, a lot of that, okay, I've also been DMing for the vast majority of my life. So there's a certain degree of familiarity, and with low-level play, there's mechanically it's simple enough that you can wing it a lot of the times. I have D&D Beyond on my computer. I can pull up the stat blocks for a goblin if I need it. I can sketch out the floor grid of a tavern or a wilderness encounter kind of freehand. There's a lot of ability to be extemporaneous. Now, when my notes get crazy is when I'm doing something like Fantasy High. And especially in those middle episodes where all of a sudden it's okay, 8 distinct scenes need to happen before we get to the next battle encounter. Unless you're running a actual play show with time limits based on your production, you should never have to be that hard on yourself with that many things developed ahead of time. You can be a lot more free-flowing. But one of the things you might want to do is, as your adventures move on from the beginning, they actually do get more complex. Characters have more intense emotional relationships between each other and NPCs. Plots get resolved in more weird ways. I've been playing this one home game for about 10 years. They're going on a 18th level dungeon crawl soon. So that has been mapped out, tremendously. And when we have sessions, my notes for intermediate and advanced sessions in a campaign will often be here's 8 different possible scenes that can happen. Here's a list of loose threads of things that characters and NPCs were working on. Here's emotional beats and things that characters have to tell other characters about. So a lot of that is weird. I think the thing that my notes track the most are probably emotional beats, how characters are feeling, what their intentions are, and what they're trying to do. That can be almost like a shot list of scenes that you need to run, and those scenes can be attached to locations, or they can be unattached to locations and just about which characters are interacting whenever they next interact, right? But then mechanically, you just need stat blocks, maps on the world level for where you need to go, and then maps on the grid level for where combat and stuff is going to happen. But I think that especially for your beginning session, it is possible to overprepare. Don't stress yourself out. You know, if you prepare this whole big adventure, you don't know who your PCs are yet. Be more willing to wing it a little bit. Find out who these people are. Unless preparation is what you need to feel comfortable improvising. For me, over preparation has always been frustrating because because time is hard. Like, I mean, real life time. Like, you're a dungeon master. You've got to you have your work where you make money to live. You need to sleep and eat. You need to maintain your friendships and family relationships. So, free time to prep a session is really rare. So for me, I am not someone who beats the drum of over preparation. Go be with your loved ones. And, for low level play, I think you can have looser ideas. A fight in a tavern, there's going to be a dungeon, you'll be able to wing it. Although maybe that's maybe that's the fact that I've done so many first level games that I just have a bullet list in my head that I'm unaware of. As I say that out loud, that sounds like it might be right. Let's see here. I'm going to read this question. There's not a good answer to this. I think that the username of this person is the word slut. And the question is, how do you have so much energy? But because of the spacing and how this was sent to me, it looked like I was being addressed as slut and then asked, how do you have so much energy? Which really delighted me. So I appreciated that. The answer to your question is, I love my job and I drink about a pot or two of coffee a day. Zigzag 22.99. Thanks, Zigzag. What is the difference in setting up a one-shot versus a full campaign? One-shots are so hard. I went on this rant the last time we did one of these office hours. People treat one-shots like they're easy. Look, the hardest thing about running the full seasons of Dimension 20 is that we have to wrap up sessions in a given amount of time. Full campaigns are so easy compared to one-shots. You want to know why? Because in a full campaign, you get to go, oh dang, it's 10:30. Let's wrap up here and I'll see y'all next time. In a one-shot, you have to finish. I guess you don't have to finish a one-shot, but at that point, it's not really a one-shot anymore because it's just a half-finished campaign. In difference of setting up, there is a part of me that, again, I feel like when people say, oh, I'm running a one-shot, I always go, that is hubris. You don't know this is a one-shot. If your PCs drive the train off the tracks in the first 5 minutes, which they often do, it won't be that much of a one-shot, my guy. So that's my little rant about that. A person, good username. Hey, I just tuned in, so I don't know if anyone asked you this yet. What's your favorite monster in D&D? Man. Man is the greatest monster of all. Cool. Lily Rosen, any tips for a DM playing as a PC for the first time? I don't want to overshadow them as the most knowledgeable or grip the reins in attempt of similar control. That's a great question, Lily. First of all, congrats for getting out of the hot seat. I'm envious. And then also, you won't overshadow anybody. I think the main thing is just remembering humility. Make sure that you're not talking way more than any of the other PCs. People resent when people are condescending to them. But nobody resents someone who is sharing knowledge from a place of actual love and compassion, right? Good teachers are never disliked for being good teachers. I think the best, honestly, the best person I can think of that is a peer teacher is Murph. Brian Murphy, who runs NADPOD, who, when he plays as a PC in Dimension 20, is the best PC in the world. The fact that he is a world-class dungeon master never takes away from how good he is at PCing. He is and he so helps other people at the table. When Murphy's at the table and he shares mechanics stuff, you can no one has ever resented, I think, Murph sharing something, because it always comes from a place of him being like, hey, I run the game, so I have a deep knowledge of the lore. There is no elitism to it. It is just like, hey, I happen to be a human rule book. Here's some information for you if you want it. I think just always be careful about how you volunteer that stuff. I think you never want to give let people like handle their own strategy, but I've never had anyone resent like saying like, oh, like, hey, you forgot to apply your extra like dexterity damage to that. No one is mad for you making their character more effective. So just don't cross the line where you're implying what other people should do. But I think clarifying a rule is very different from attempting to control the game. That would be my little rule of thumb there. Elisa T. Hi, Brennan. I really like your beard. Thank you. My girlfriend Izzy likes it too. So, you know, that's and that's why it's here. I like it too. I was just wondering at what age you started going to Wayfinder. I might be going next summer. And also what bands/artists you're into right now. This question is so friendly. It's nothing to do with running tabletop games. That's totally fine. I was 11 when I started going to Wayfinder. It wasn't Wayfinder yet at that point. It was called AGT. And the bands and artists I'm into right now are the stock music that we use to provide the music for Dimension 20 Live. That sounds like a joke, but it's actually very true. I love making those playlists. I gotta share those one day. Let's see here. Okay. Hold on. We'll find another one. Jordan Nichols, how do you think Drunks and Dragons would go? My players really want me to DM a Drunks and Dragons one shot. Cool. That's gonna go bad. Probably. Listen. You know, I am not a drinker myself, but it has been explained to me that people enjoy the recreational consumption of alcohol. I worked as a bartender for many, many years. So I understand that recreational drinking is very fun. Dungeons and Dragons is also very fun. And I think that most people, like, you know, a lot of games that I'm familiar with, people will have like a nice glass of wine or a mug of, I almost said a mug of ale. People will have a drink, which is totally great. But if you're getting sloppy drunk, the like arithmetic, something's gonna, either your drinking is gonna suffer or your playing is gonna suffer. There is too much quick, urgent arithmetic to make inebriation a fun part of Dungeons and Dragons. My 2 cents, but you don't have to agree with me. I definitely am coming at that from a biased perspective. Let's see here. Oh, this is a great question. We'll end on this one. Greg Wilkinson, how do you keep from creating a whole lot of red herrings in your campaign? Chekhov's gun says you shouldn't have unnecessary elements. Things happen in campaigns that are left unfinished. Greg, this is a great question, and it's really frustrating. And the reason it's frustrating is in an interesting fantasy world, there should be tons of cool stuff going on that doesn't have to do with the plot TM. If you have a big old wizard library, your PCs go snooping around for stuff, of course they're going to find cool stuff. It's a bunch of wizard books everywhere. But there's an inclination on the part of your PCs to go, I found this thing. Could this be connected to other stuff? They're not wrong to make those assumptions, right? Because this is not virtual reality. Meaning, you know, when you go out through the world, things that catch your attention are catching your attention organically. Your eyes focus on movement and things that are bright and shiny. You know, your attention goes where it would naturally go. But because in D&D, the world as it is being narrated by you, you're of course putting emphasis on stuff. It's natural, right? Every person that's been playing D&D for a little while knows if the DM goes like, you walk into the quarters of the ship's captain, you see some, furniture around and some bottle of wine and stuff like that, and there's a gilded map on the captain's desk. You're like, okay, grab the map. The map's the thing in this room, right? It's almost like a video game where there's like a little aura around what you're supposed to interact with, right? So as a dungeon master, what you put emphasis on, or in the same way, if you're like, okay, there's 3 mercenary companies that your characters can hire. You can hire the Red Sword Mercenary Company, which is a company of human mercenaries. You can hire the Green Sword Mercenary Company, which is a company of elves, or you can hire the Swords of the Seventh Wind, which are a group of elite half-elves and half-orcs. And everyone's going to be like, that third one, you used more words. That's the one you like, right? So it's really hard because that is a natural part of DMing, so your players aren't wrong for calling that kind of stuff out. They'll be like, oh, whatever the DM says is important, or they wouldn't have said it. However, that gets tricky when you are just adding detail to a world, or if your players start investigating something and you just want to flesh it out because they're investigating it, not because it's necessarily important. That can be really, really tricky. One thing that you can, I think, kind of do is gauge the degree to which your PCs are metagaming. Now, metagaming is sort of a dirty word, right? So we don't, but it always happens a little bit. It's not like PCs are always trying to get an advantage, but just something like, I think the DM wants us to notice this, is an example of metagaming, right? So if you see your PCs going like, oh, this is definitely important, or the DM wouldn't have mentioned it, what you can instead do is, if you see that they're having those out-of-character thoughts, address those out-of-character thoughts with out-of-character thoughts of your own. Lean over and be like, your character investigates this. I'm just going to tell you guys right now, this seems unrelated to what your players are investigating. That's putting your thumb on the scale a little bit, but sometimes it's okay to address that kind of metagaming by just saying like, hey, this is some cool stuff I made up. It's not plot significant. And then I think you even have a talk with your players about being like, guys, I'm never going to screw you for like missing the clue. Not everything I say is going to be plot relevant. Your players will appreciate that. On the other hand, you can also say everything I say is always plot relevant, in which case they'll observe that, and that'll be the rule of your game. Guys, this has been Adventure Academy Office Hours. I'm Brennan Lee Mulligan. Thanks so much for hanging out, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye. Oh, and tune in for Dimension 20 Live tomorrow at 7 p.m. Pacific. Dropout.tv. Check out the Dimension 20 merch store. Guys, have very happy holidays and a happy new year. I'll see you guys in the new year. Mwah.